All right, today we're diving into a true legend in the business world, In Search of Excellence. I mean, this book was a total game changer back in the 80s. But the real question, the one we're here to answer, is does any of its advice actually work today? Let's get into it.
Yeah, that's really the heart of it, isn't it? We live in this crazy world of AI, nonstop disruption, and startups popping up everywhere. So can a book from the era of big hair and Walkmans really hold any secrets for success now? Or is it just a cool-looking book for your shelf? I think you'll be surprised.
Okay, so to really get this, we gotta jump in the time machine and head back to the early 80s. You got these two guys, Tom Peters and Robert Waterman. They're consultants at the legendary firm McKinsey Company, and they are completely obsessed with this one big puzzle. And that puzzle was, why did some companies seem to have all the luck? You know, they weren't just successful for a quarter or two, they were these absolute titans year after year. Peters and Waterman basically wanted to figure out what their secret sauce was. They wanted to bottle that lightning.
So after digging through tons and tons of research, they came to a pretty shocking conclusion. The solution wasn't some super complex financial model or a secret algorithm. Nope, it was a set of shared principles, almost like a cultural DNA, that all these amazing companies had in common.
And you know what? After looking at dozens of these top-tier companies, they boiled it all down to just 8. 8 core principles. Not 100, not 20, just 8. And they argued that these were the keys to the kingdom.
Let's take one of the most famous ones, a bias for action. It sounds simple, right? But it's so powerful. The best companies, they don't get stuck in what we call analysis paralysis. They just do stuff. They try things out, they experiment, they learn, and they adapt on the fly, instead of sitting in boardrooms planning for years.
Okay, so here's the full list, the big 8. Just take a look. You can already see some themes popping out, right? There's a huge focus on people, on customers, and on keeping things simple. I mean, stuff like productivity through people or close to the customer, that might sound like Business 101 today, but back then, it was revolutionary. Even stick to the knitting feels like it's predicting our modern obsession with core competencies. But that last one, that one's a little tricky, and it's definitely worth a closer look.
Right, this loose-tight concept, it's probably my favorite because it's a total paradox. The loose part is all about giving your people freedom. Let them be entrepreneurs, let them innovate, let them own their work. But, and this is a big but, the tight part means you are absolutely rigid about your core company values. So it's this amazing balancing act, being super decentralized and creative while also being incredibly disciplined about what truly matters.
So, why on earth are we still talking about a book from 1982? The answer is pretty fascinating. It's not really about the specific companies they profiled. It's about the ideas. The core philosophy is just timeless.
You can really boil down its lasting impact to 3 key things. First, it uses these incredible stories, these case studies, to make its points. Second, those points are surprisingly relevant even today. But the biggest reason, the real game changer, was its laser focus on the human side of business. And this is where the book really turned everything on its head. See, before In Search of Excellence, business books were all about the numbers: strategy, finance, operations. This book came along and said, hey, what about the people? What about the culture? It argued that those things weren't just fluffy, soft concepts. They were the actual engines of performance.
Just think about it for a second. Today, every single successful company is obsessed with the customer experience, right? They're all talking about empowering their employees. Well, guess what? These aren't new ideas. They're direct descendants of the principles laid out in this very book decades ago.
Okay, but let's be real. The book isn't some magic formula that's perfect and timeless. Not at all. It's gotten a lot of criticism over the years, and if we're going to give a fair verdict, we have to look at the other side of the coin.
Most of the critiques really fall into 3 main buckets. The first and biggest one is something called survivorship bias. We'll talk about that in a sec. Then there's the obvious fact that the examples are, well, really dated. And finally, some people argue that the principles, while they sound great, are maybe a little too simple for today's world. So this idea of survivorship bias, this is the book's Achilles heel, really.
Critics correctly point out that a bunch of the companies that were praised as excellent, well, they didn't stay excellent. Some went into a steep decline, others got bought out, and some just completely lost their way. And that kind of suggests that maybe these 8 principles aren't a silver bullet for long-term success, especially when markets change.
And that brings us to the other big knock on the book: oversimplification. Look, a slogan like "stick to the knitting" is awesome. It's catchy, it's easy to remember, but does it tell you how to handle a global supply chain crisis, or a massive digital transformation, or a cybersecurity attack? Not really. It lacks that deep operational detail.
All right, so we've looked at the good, we've looked at the bad. After weighing this timeless wisdom against some really valid criticisms, what's the final verdict? What is the real lasting legacy of In Search of Excellence?
I think a fair, balanced view looks kind of like this. On one hand, its incredible strength is that it gives us this powerful, people-first blueprint for building a fantastic culture. But on the other hand, you can't deny its weakness. It is absolutely a product of its time. You have to be willing to look past the shoulder pads and the 80s companies to find the gold.
When you boil it all down, this is the book's enduring gift to the world. It fundamentally changed how we think about management. It made the case loud and clear that how you treat your people and your customers isn't just a side issue, it's the very foundation of any great, lasting company.
So what's the best way to approach this book today? I'd say you need to read it with 2 hats on. First, see it as this amazing piece of business history that literally changed the conversation. But also, look at it as a source of fundamental truths, foundational ideas that you can totally adapt for the challenges we're all facing right now. And that leaves us with one last thing to chew on. Take another look at that list of 8 principles, from having a bias for action to staying close to your customer. Which one of those, which single one, do you think matters the most? Not back then, but for 2025 and beyond? That's a question we're thinking about.